From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. Glad to have you with us for another week. As you know, we like to talk about all the really big, ponderous things that face us, all the crises that face us, including the schools teetering on the edge and what's going to happen, in the latest iteration of the schools crisis. Charter schools, lots of them, we know that now. And also, of course, the budget that we don't have, which we don't care about anymore because now we're working on the next state budget, because why worry about the one that's already passed? But anyway, I bring all this up to say something often just kind of bubbles up just below the surface. There are issues that we don't get a chance to really sit back and talk about, that we drive past every day without really realizing what's going on. And if you happen to use, say, the Kennedy Expressway or Elston or Clybourn or something, you have driven past a planned manufacturing district right in that area there down by Cortland. Probably 100,000, 100 or 1,000 times you've done it without really knowing about the big battles that are going on there right now. If you've ever driven along Cortland, you've seen that big steel mill that's not there anymore. Well, that's Finkel, and they've moved away, but it's good news. We'll hear more about that. It's actually a good thing that they moved out. But to all the residents and the neighborhood groups and the aldermen and the mayor and the developers, they can smell the meat a-cooking, because what we really need there is more condo towers, more really expensive residential, single family homes, and who knows, maybe a Bed Bath & Beyond or something like that. Wouldn't that be great? There's somebody who thinks maybe there's a different vision, and he's joining us here today. From North Branch Works, Mike Holzer is joining us today. Mike, glad to have you with us on the show. I know that's maybe a little bit of a lofty introduction, but I do consider these things to be really big deals, these debates that we get into that don't make it onto the 10 o'clock news. They're kind of they're policy debates that happen behind the scenes. So let's begin at the beginning. Mayor Daley says we need to protect some of these districts in our city, and we're going to create something called PMDs, right?
Actually,
bring us up to date.
Yep. The program really got its footing under Mayor Washington, under Harold Washington, and Mayor Washington really. I think put a premium on bottoms-up problem solving. Mm-hmm. You've got a problem in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. We're not going to ivory tower the solution. We need you to help us figure it out. Yeah. And he committed resources to communities and community groups. North Branch Works is a small nonprofit community economic development agency. Mm-hmm. And we were known as the New City YMCA Lead Council, or Local Economic Development Council at the time, and Local Economic and Employment Development Council. We rebranded about 7 years ago as North Branch Works.
Well, you kind of had to because Lead got taken away from you, didn't
right.
it? L-E-E-D, now it's
made
Lead
for
buildings.
Very interesting elevator conversations about LEED certification,
right,
which is actually something that...
you're the guys who do that certification.
Right. But yes, the concept of creating these industrial corridors, mm-hmm. and of really looking at problem solving at the local level was very much a premium with Mayor Washington. Yeah. When Mayor, and then Sawyer was in for a little while, and then Mayor Daley, when he first came in office, I remember I was working at the Lead Council at the time, mm-hmm. part of CAN DO, mm-hmm. The Chicago Association of Neighborhood Development Organizations. Yeah. And we would get together with other like-minded industrial development organizations that were around the city. Mm-hmm. I remember that there was a headline. It was either in the Trib or the Sun-Times. And it said, Mayor Daley says industry is dead.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
When we saw that, working on the issue of industrial retention, mm-hmm. and trying to figure out, what we can do to retain the industry we still have in Chicago, because in the 1980s, we still had hundreds of thousands of jobs at industry, and we were losing jobs. We were bleeding jobs, but it wasn't for lack of not wanting to keep those jobs. There were global issues at stake, at foot. Japan and Germany were making a better mousetrap. We were getting out-competed.
That was back in the days when we were worried about Japan.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
We had very high interest rates, 13-14% interest to borrow money. So those were some global issues that a little neighborhood group and neighborhoods couldn't necessarily control. But what we could control was zoning. And one of the issues that we were very concerned about was the impact of condo development, and at the time there wasn't really even a market for condo development. It was more conversion of older factories into loft rentals, as well as retail uses coming in, big boxes.
Oh, yeah. Well, you just go a little bit south on Clybourn, you go to north on Clybourn.
And you've got it.
Right.
And the difference there was industry paid a head of household wage. And the MIC jobs, as we called them at the retail, they paid entry-level wages, minimum wages. They didn't provide benefits. They didn't provide health care and other things. They weren't the type of job that you could raise a family on. Whereas these jobs, and you mentioned Finkel in your introduction, the average wage for a Finkel job at the time I started at Lead Council in 1988 was about $75,000 or $80,000 a year. These were tool and die making jobs that were highly skilled jobs, and they were head of household jobs. So with a job at Finkel, and Finkel had 450 employees at their height over in the Clybourn and Elston corridor areas. At their height, 450 jobs. Those people, 75% of those workers lived in Chicago, and they were sprinkled throughout every single ward. So all 50 wards of Chicago had Finkel workers living in them. But back to the story about Mayor Daley. So industry is dead. So proclaims the mayor on the Sun-Times or Trib headline. That really got us very concerned. Because we were engaged in this fledgling effort to retain these districts where you still had hundreds of industries representing thousands of jobs. Along the North Branch of the Chicago River, at its height, we probably had 40,000 workers working at between 1,200 and 1,500 industrial firms.
That is incredible to think about.
Yeah.
I just have to interject here a little bit that a while back I was hired for some freelance work at public radio to do a Curious City piece on. They wanted something done on the history of the Clybourn bus and streetcar, which I love to do. So it was so interesting to go back and get to spend time going back through the archives and looking at that there were streetcars that there were two different lines running down Clybourn up until the 50s because there was so much activity there. There were so many people going to and from jobs, three shifts a day kind of thing.
Absolutely.
It's very different than what you see in Clybourn today.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So, we had begun this effort, this fledgling effort to really get the city to look at the importance of industry and jobs and to begin taking steps to address the issue, and the term was coined industrial displacement. And that's basically when economic forces are come to bear in a certain geographic area and can lead to displacement of industry. Industry doesn't necessarily want to go. Industry has been on the North Branch since the late 1870s. I think Finkel was founded there in 1879. We still have a tannery there, Horween Leather, that's been there for probably 70 or 80 years. So these, but the city did not have a tool to really address this displacement issue. And working with first Mayor Washington, then Eugene Sawyer, And then eventually, Mayor Daley, we were able to get the mayor to see the importance of retaining these districts. And that with this tool, planned manufacturing districts, it's very similar to the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. The Lakefront Protection Ordinance, everybody from Chicago or who's visited Chicago understands that we have a lakefront that's free and clear. You can go down forever, although we're battling that right now.
Except for rich museum people.
Right. But it's something that really provides a tremendous amount of value for all of Chicago residents and for people who come and visit. You can get access, and it's a public good. The Lakefront Protection Ordinance is created and reviewed by the Plan Commission. Developments that come in on the lakefront, they aren't a zoning change done in an aldermanic back office. The full light of day is shown on that at the Plan Commission level. PMDs are very similar. These older industrial corridors,
planned manufacturing
districts. These older industrial corridors, most of them were zoned M, manufacturing zoning, but the significance of the PMD is M zoning can be changed at the whim of an alderman or a developer, an influential developer, in talking to an alderman. And we actually had that occur in the Clybourn corridor with Marty Oberman, with Alderman Oberman, and that's the old Piano Lofts building. It's the first and only conversion of a former industrial loft building into residential housing. And at the time, that was so early, that was in the mid-'80s, Alderman Oberman did not really understand what the impact that this could have. So it was actually a good thing because it really perked up and woke up the industries to, hey, if you're used to having an industrial area where you can operate free from complaints about noise and other typical things that occur in these industrial districts, if that can be changed at the whim of an alderman changing zoning, then you've got no security. And when that happened, a lot of these industry put their investments on hold because they weren't sure about the city's commitment to this area, the aldermanic commitment. And that's really where the PMD comes in, much like the Lakefront Protection Ordinance. It says, industry in this area is the highest and best use. We value these industrial jobs. Every one industrial job has a 3.5 job multiplier. So if we've got, and we have today, 10,000 jobs in the North Branch Industrial Corridor, so we're down from that 40, but we've got 10,000. And
so how many of these PMDs survive to this day?
I think there are 15.
15 of them?
Yeah, I think there are 15. The first was the Clybourn Corridor Planned Manufacturing District. That was designated in 1988. The next two were Goose Island and the Elston Corridor PMD. Those were designated in 91. And then the Kinsey Corridor PMD, which runs along Kinsey pretty much from, I think, Halstead all the way out to, I'm not exactly sure, maybe it's Western or California.
There's a little string of old factories in there.
And there's probably 1,000 factories out along there. And then the Chicago Halstead PMD, where Blommer Chocolate is located.
So the point is that they're still around and they're still doing their jobs. Okay, but the reason that we're here today is to talk about this area in the North Branch. This is your focus. And as we said earlier, I mean, it's like, this is a battle that's really shaping up, because you really do have, from the perspective of people who don't want manufacturing there anymore, they see a 100-year opportunity to grab that river, to make it into a beautiful residential area, which would be contiguous to a lot of other beautiful residential areas. And I think to a lot of people, it's just like, it's time to finish it off. But you and a few of your friends are just kind of basically standing in the way of progress.
Right. Yeah, we have seen the PMDs be extremely successful at doing what they were set out to do, which is to continue to create stable, affordable areas for industry and businesses to come in and invest.
But isn't that the thing that we really have to talk about today? Because in order to make an argument back, to push back against the Chicago is becoming a residential city, not a manufacturing city, let's get with the times argument. In order to push back against that argument, you really have to be willing to look at the issue of what do we mean by industry. Okay, I mean, manufacturing is, I think we all understand there's a lot less manufacturing everywhere in the United States than there was before. And big old and outdated loft buildings aren't really serving even manufacturing as well anymore. So you really have to kind of begin from the beginning and rethink this thing. I mean, you can keep, if you can keep the designation, you still have to rethink what's going to be in there, right? You're not going to have tanneries in there anymore.
You probably won't get a new tannery coming in, but we have one that's there that employs probably 200 people, and they have become very iconic. They actually make the leather for the NFL footballs, for baseball gloves. The Shinola Watch Company out of Detroit. Talk about bringing back inner city manufacturing. They use Horween leather for their straps. I have boots at home that I bought once I found out they were made by Horween. And it's a fascinating place. And they're tapping into the makers movement and this cachet of made in the U.S., made in the inner city, and people are being drawn to that. So we still have a number of those legacy companies that are up and down the river.
But still, I guess what I'm trying to say is that's great, but the future is not legacy companies that are managing to repurpose themselves. I mean, what we're seeing, and this is something that, this is why I really wanted to have you here to talk about this. I get a little bit tired of hearing about 1872, is it 1871? I can never remember when the Chicago Fire was. But you know, it's like, you can pick up any business publication and see about all the wonderful new stuff that's happening at, you know, with the startups, and all that kind of thing. But I have to say that at some point, this has to turn into something more tangible. There has to be a product that is more than just a bunch of people kind of planning the future or whatever it is. I don't mean to disparage it, but there is a new kind of manufacturing, a new kind of industry, and it involves things that maybe don't have great big heavy equipment and machinery, so you don't need like massive electrical grids to feed them. And is it possible that these planned manufacturing districts can adapt themselves, like the tannery is adapting itself, to this new kind of industry, whatever it is?
Yes, and actually the North Branch Industrial Corridor and our 4 planned manufacturing districts that comprise the corridor, if you look at the profile of the businesses that have been developing there over the last 25 years since the PMDs have been in place, it has really evolved and changed. We still have manufacturing businesses that are coming in and building. If you look at Water Saver Faucet, for example, this is a family-owned business, 4th generation. They make faucets for laboratories and hospitals around the world. They went through an exhaustive search about 10 years ago for where do they put their new factory, where can they expand. They looked at the Chicago Paperboard site, which was a 17-acre site that was available just to the west of Goose Island, but they couldn't strike a deal, and they were actually outbid by a developer who wanted to put an auto mall there, sell cars. That did not go forward, but Water Saver ended up basically bifurcating their factory, putting half of it in a former magazine warehouse that they bought on Goose Island, where they manufacture today in a LEED-rated building, and the other half they basically built up in their existing facility, which is in the same PMD that Blommer Chocolate's located in, spending probably $30 million retrofitting that plant. But if you walk that factory floor today, you'll see tremendous amounts of technology and equipment, computerization, CAD, computer-aided design and manufacturing, and it is not, and you can eat off of this factory floor. So
could we focus on politics for a while, because
Sure.
that's really what
Sure.
we talk about
Sure.
here, and we only really have a few minutes left.
Sure.
Where are we as far as the politics is concerned? Is Mayor Emanuel as supportive of planned manufacturing as Mayor Daley came to be? There's a new alderman, Brian Hopkins is the alderman there, and I read a quote from him in Cranes where he said, as far as he's concerned, the planned manufacturing district is quote unquote handcuffs to the community, that it needs to be gotten rid of. I mean, he's kind of, I don't think he's said it exactly publicly, but he appears to be moving away from wanting to have industry in this ward, in this new second ward, that weird ward.
Yep.
So what is the political future here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And actually, Mayor Emanuel, under his watch, began an effort to take a look at the city's industrial policies, both land use and other, and to evaluate those and upgrade those. This started under former Commissioner Andrew Mooney, who was head of DPD or DHEAD at the time, and it to some extent has continued under new Commissioner Reifman. This is called the Chicago Sustainable Industries Initiative, and the report that they issued said basically that the PMDs have succeeded beyond anybody's expectations, especially the 5 or 6 that were the early ones, the ones that we did, that ICNC did, that cover Goose Island, Clybourn and Elston, Kinsey, and the area near Water Saver Faucet. Those boundaries were very defensible, and those are creating jobs and companies, and reinvestment is happening, and we actually have a 96% occupancy rate in the North Branch Industrial Corridor, meaning even the second and third floors of these older industrial buildings are filled with jobs producing uses. So where is the current mayor on this?
Yeah, where is the current mayor on this?
This evaluation was supposed to have been rolled out a couple years ago, and vetted and voted on by aldermen, and that to our knowledge has not happened. We're waiting. We're waiting for that vetting and for that support.
Okay.
And so let me just add this. With the lack of leadership coming out of the fifth floor on this, speculation is starting to chip away.
Speculation fills the void.
Right.
And of course, I don't know how much you want to comment on this, but there has been a lot of speculation that this new commissioner, I don't know anything about him, but he definitely has, his background is in development.
Right.
He was the guy who represented the Cubs, for God's sake, in the redevelopment of Wrigley Field. He did the Ryerson Steel redevelopment. He's been a zoning lawyer, a TIF specialist. This does not look like a guy who is going to be all that excited about trying to bring in a few manufacturing plants when you could build a beautiful tower right there on that curve of the river. You know, he seems like he'd be more interested in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of light being shown right now on the new commissioner. I think he has come in wanting to figure this stuff out. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's got a job that nobody would envy. But I think this mayor took a lot of heat in the last election for not providing jobs for Chicago residents and not having policies that impact the typical Chicagoan, especially somebody who needs and wants a good job. And I really think the PMDs, embracing these industrial corridors, since these jobs are spread throughout every single ward of the city, this is a feel-good story that would address a lot of those things, those deficits
you said
that came up in that election.
That one of the advantages of PMDs is that it gets it out of the claws of the alderman who can just arbitrarily change a zoning thing. But of course, Alderman Hopkins wants to just, well, I shouldn't put words in his mouth. There are indications that he might prefer not to have the PMD anymore, which would then give him the ability to do that kind of stuff. What do you say to, have you met with Alderman Hopkins, and what do you say to him if you meet with him?
We have not met with him yet. We have asked for a meeting with him to talk about the plan that we developed, what we're calling the Riverworks plan, which is the US EPA funded plan that we put together. That
And you can see it online, by the way.
Yep.
There's a
www.northbranchworks.org. You can navigate to the programs area, and you can download segments of this plan. It's a very big doc, but we split it up into manageable chunks. We have yet to meet face-to-face with the alderman. We've met with his chief of staff, but we have not met with the alderman. And I feel that if once he got to understand these PMDs and how they could actually help him, I think he might have a different take. Yeah. Alderman Burnett, 27th Ward, he's been very supportive of PMDs. Of course, he grew up in Cabrini and understands the importance of a good job. Yeah. Alderman Wagaspack, very supportive of PMDs. Both of those aldermen abut the second
contiguous,
ward.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I don't envy Alderman Hopkins, because he has this new ward that is this Frankenstein ward. It starts over in the Gold Coast, and it picks up this empty space here and goes I don't know where else. And so he's representing just bunches and bunches of people who have completely different points of view about what he should do. And he's, well, hey, he ran for the job. So that's the way it is. I'm afraid we're running out of time here. So are you optimistic? Can you give me a sentence? Are you optimistic about this happening?
I think we're optimistic. I think that people understand that, yes, industry is evolving, but these districts that we've created that have attracted jobs in industry and businesses and a new emerging businesses, tech office, artisanal manufacturing, makers movement, last mile distribution.
That's the future.
We need places for these. UI Labs on Goose Island. This is a great example.
This is a very interesting conversation, and it's never going to end. Well, let's hope it does end at some point, but we'll have you back. We'll talk about this again as things go by, okay?
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike. Mike Holzer from North Branch Works on our program today. We'll be back next week. We're going to have Bruce Dumont in the studio to tell us what's going on with the election coming up a couple of days from then. So that'll be interesting, I hope. Thank you for joining us. We will see you again next week with another program. It's a production of CAN TV, of course, and you can see us anytime by going to this address right here, and we'll see you next week with another show. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.